Bun găsit! Viața m-a pus în situații foarte diferite. Vreau să vă spun că am făcut lucruri la care nu mă așteptam că le voi face, dar întotdeauna mi-au plăcut provocările. De data aceasta însă n-am crezut că o să fiu în situația de a face și de a realiza un podcast. Dar uite-mă aici și nu oricum, ci cu mentorul și profesorul meu. Așa că vă puteți imagina ce simt în momentele acestea. Emoție, dar și foarte multă bucurie, pentru că știu sigur că voi învăța foarte multe, pentru că așa sunt toate întâlnirile noastre. Învăț foarte mult, aflu lucruri noi, văd lucrurile dintr-o altă perspectivă, pentru că invitatul de astăzi este un vizionar, un om care a văzut multe, a trăit și mai ales a trăit lucrurile acestea cu bucurie. Sunt Teodora Chifor, fondator EduBiz, iar în această perioadă ne-am propus, pentru motivul foarte evident, împlinim 10 ani de EduBiz, ne-am propus să vă facem cunoștință cu cei care gândesc, se bucură, creează, inspiră peste 1000 de tineri din Transilvania deja de 10 ani. În tot ceea ce facem la EduBiz, credem cu tărie că dacă îi inspirăm pe tineri să-și găsească pasiunile, până la urmă fiecare persoană are pasiuni, despre asta e vorba când vorbim de o ființă umană, acești tineri vor crește în așa fel încât să ajungă modele și să aibă un impact pozitiv în comunitate. Peste 1000 de tineri au intrat în programele EduBiz în ultimii 10 ani. Astăzi sunt peste tot în lume. Se adaptează și mai ales inspiră la rândul lor comunitatea în care trăiesc. Sunt autentici, sunt autonomi și mai ales sunt lideri în propria lor viață. Asta facem, despre asta e vorba la EduBiz. Astăzi am șansa să vă fac cunoștință cu un nou membru din Advisory Board EduBiz. Dacă Mihaela Tatu a realizat un podcast cu Carmen Sasu, Chairwoman în Advisory Board, puteți să intrați pe YouTube și să găsiți mai multe informații și pe social media EduBiz. O să vă placă la nebunie. Acum, astăzi, e rândul meu să l-am invitat pe Craig Marsh, Dr. Craig Marsh. Este profesor, este antreprenor, este formator, este mentor, lider, un om extraordinar și sunt convinsă că veți învăța, veți descoperi lucruri extraordinare, așa că eu sunt minte și inimă deschisă și sunt convinsă că la fel veți fi și voi, fie că sunteți tineri, părinți și, de ce nu, profesori. Cu îngăduința dumneavoastră, acest podcast va fi în limba engleză, evident, așa că fiți îngăduitori, poate că voi face greșeli, dar nu este despre a greși, ci este despre a experimenta, a trăi, a învăța și mai ales de a te bucura. Craig, welcome, and I'm very honored and as I mentioned previously, it's not strange, but a different position for me because you are my mentor and my professor. And yeah, I tell everyone I will probably be nervous a little bit, so they will definitely feel it, which is good.
It is, and it's a pleasure to be here, Teodora.
Thanks a lot. I've met you 4 years ago when you came to Romania.
That's right.
Introduced by another member of the advisory board that you will discover soon, Urs Hauenstein, is the third time for you in Romania.
It is.
Why is that?
Many more, I hope.
I hope so too.
You mean apart from the fact that it's such a beautiful place?
A part of that.
Which is a big attraction, of course. And I've discovered, thanks to you, actually, I've discovered Transylvania and just what a wonderful place this is. So that's obviously part of the attraction. But I think actually also the opportunity to work with you and to develop new opportunities, to add new value to this part of the world through the work that you already do with EduBiz, but also I guess through our new opportunities. So and the chance to create something new, create something of value, work with young people on educational projects, on research projects, and to see those young people transforming, to be able to touch their lives in a positive way. And that's, I mean, what's not to like about it? It's such a fantastic opportunity.
So you were talking about education, transforming people's lives, seeing the impact on youth. Yeah. Why a professor from UK, from Liverpool Hope University, is member in an advisory board of an association in Romania, Transylvania, named EduBiz?
Well, I suppose once you're passionate about education, which is something that's driven me for most of my career, then why not, actually, would be the better question. And the work that you've done here, the inspirational work that you've done with EduBiz over the last 10 years, to be involved in that is an honor, it's a pleasure, it's a fantastic opportunity to contribute to some young lives. And I think also, given that I am still based in the UK, the opportunity to add something perhaps a little new or a little different by creating some of those links to students in the UK, such that perhaps part of their education then can be about experiencing opportunities abroad with students that perhaps they haven't otherwise been in touch with. And perhaps students from the UK can learn from the work that is going on here in EduBiz. Because as you and I have talked about, actually often what we do is bring people together and create those links so that they can benefit from it. So yeah, that's...
Yeah, exactly. We were talking about this within the last few months.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to see that in UK, the work, holistic development and what we are doing at EduBiz, it's really needed.
It is. It is. There's no doubt that it is needed in the UK, certainly parts of the UK, as it is here. And I think there's some things that we can learn actually in the UK about, particularly about that important transition that you support the EduBiz students through, that transition from being a boy or a girl, a young person, into being an adult, and all of the different stages that represents, those crucial stages of their development, such that you're making sure that they are making the most of that opportunity. And those links and the support and encouragement and the mentoring through those crucial stages of their life is absolutely something that I think we can do more of in the UK as well.
Yeah, so we have work to do.
So we have some work to do there as well, yeah.
Okay, so definitely there are clear connections in terms of education. You've been passionate about this all your life. You've been actually knowing and helping those who are watching us to discover more about you. They will understand. But who's Craig Marsh?
Who am I? Well, that's a very big question. I suppose the most obvious way of answering that, I think, is probably someone who is, I've tried to spend my career not thinking too much about my own priorities and what I need to do, but thinking about how I can get the best out of others. And it's something that I've not always done, but it's something that I've learned to do, and that actually I can get my own fulfillment and passion from seeing others develop and change from the work that we do together. Whether that's students, obviously students of all ages, but also the people that I come into contact with as as a leader, as a business person, as the head of a business school, seeing them develop and thinking, for me, I've often thought of that as being other regarding rather than self-regarding is probably the best way of doing that. Now, I sometimes do that badly, and we can all be selfish sometimes. But I think trying to develop a way of working which considers and puts others first is something that I try and do, and then try and perhaps help others to think of their own roles in the same way, including some of these young people, because they're all very into themselves.
What I'd like to, because indeed, if it's to think about Craig Marsh, as I managed to know, it's exactly about that, about looking to the other, oriented to the other, and not to yourself. But then tell me how everything started. You were mentioning previously helping young ones, transforming from young girls, boys to adults.
Yeah.
How was your
My transformation? Well, it wasn't like that. So, when I was the age of some of the young people we've been working with today, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But when I was at university, as you know, I did classics at university, which is not very useful for very much other than teaching, actually, other than I was passionate about that subject. So I enjoyed it, and that's why I took it.
What was your university?
Oxford.
Oxford.
I got into probably the best university in the world for doing that subject, which I was really fortunate to do. And I came from my background was poor. My parents had a shop. I just happened to be quite bright. And my parents encouraged me not to do the obvious. So there was, even in those days, as you hear now, to get a good job, you have to do science, you have to do something useful, you have to do economics or business. And I had some advice from my parents' friends who said, no, if you enjoy that, do what you enjoy. And if you happen to be good at it as well, so much the better. So that's the advice I got.
It's important for a young one
to
have this piece of advice,
that was extremely
even today.
Important. Yeah. So as a 16-year-old, when I was making my choices, the school didn't help. And I hear some of our EduBists saying the same thing. The school didn't help.
Who helped you to take this decision?
I remember very clearly a conversation with a friend of my father's who was talking to me about what I was doing. I was trying to decide what I wanted to do for my A-levels. And a lot of the people were, and particularly in the school, were saying you had to do maths, physics, chemistry.
Classical
but
advice.
Not classics, Well, why would you do that? Because there's nothing you can do except teach with it. And I said, no, there'll be many things you can do with classics. So if you enjoy it and you're passionate about it, then do it. And that was all he said. And that I thought, okay, I'll take that advice. And that's what I did.
So it's
and that changed my
important to
life.
have a person who really...
A mentor.
A mentor.
Even a person who I don't think I'd seen before, and I don't think I'd met again afterwards. But that was a very formative. And so when we think about the roles that we perform now, having got through some, in my case, most of your life, is that even just a 5-minute conversation like that with a young person who is making those choices can transform them. And you might not even know that you've done it. And I'm sure that person who was my father's friend probably never realized the effect that he had on me. And that was the advice. Do what you enjoy. Do what you're passionate about. And I, for some bizarre reason, had a passion for ancient civilizations and studying them and understanding them and getting to know them, which I think there are some parallels in modern life that you can use. So that's what I chose.
So you started and you were accepted at Oxford.
Yeah.
Was it difficult at that time?
Yeah, it was. I didn't think I would do it. But I had a great teacher as well who helped me to get through. So another mentor, yeah, who helped me to get through the process, and somebody I still remember, I'm still in touch with. And he helped me to develop this passion. And I think even now our young people are being encouraged to do professions, to do things that look like they will get them a job. And sometimes they're unhappy in those choices. And if they're unhappy in those choices, then it's the wrong choice. So for me, that's still very much a message, even after 35, 40 years of experience. So that's something that I try and develop with others.
Okay.
So that's what took me to
Oxford.
The University of Oxford, yeah.
Yeah, and then with the classics, with
I did something
the
really
degrees
obvious, yeah.
in your hand.
Yeah.
it was in your hand, you could do it, everything, it's the best university in the world. What was the next?
I did something really obvious. I became a pilot.
How come obvious?
Absolutely. So I wasn't the best of students at Oxford, I have to say. So I did lots of other things.
According to professors?
According to my tutors, yes.
Okay.
Actually, I think they liked me. I didn't do much reading. I didn't do a lot of going to lectures and things. Don't do this at home, kids. But I was quite original in the way I treated my subject. So we had some great conversations. I wrote some good essays. So, I did that. But my main passions were playing rugby and flying, because I joined the air squadron and thought, okay, well, this is better than working for a living. So
while you were a student?
Yeah, I was able to learn to fly.
Okay.
Yeah.
As an extracurricular?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's important not just to stick to the studies during your studies, but try to do other things extra.
You're absolutely right, Theodora. One of the things that we see our good EduBiz doing a lot is trying many different things, because at that age you really don't know. You don't know what you're going to be really good at. You don't know what your real passion is going to be. So trying many things and then exploring those different options. And often that is not about the subject you're studying, but about the other opportunities.
You were having this passion of flying.
Yes.
And you didn't stop only to the idea of I like flying, like just looking on the sky. You turn it into an action.
I turned it into a career.
During your studies, extracurricular courses.
Indeed.
So because the university offered you this opportunity.
So the opportunity was indeed to join in the UK, to join what we call an air squadron, which is run by the Royal Air Force, and it gives you a chance to be a cadet and to fly without any commitments to joining the Royal Air Force afterwards. Although, because I loved it so much, I did. So I went through the selection process, and I did officer training, and I did the first part of flying training, because that was something that I just really, really, really enjoyed. So something that is not an obvious choice when you've just studied Latin, Greek and philosophy at university, but I've never really tried to do the obvious thing.
So you became a pilot? I
became a pilot, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then
I decided...
For how long?
For just over 2 years.
Okay.
So then I realized actually that while I really, really, really enjoyed being a pilot, I wasn't actually a very good pilot, which is a problem when you're learning to fly fast jets. So I was okay. They wanted me to fly big aircraft, multi-engine, but my passion was for flying things fast. So I decided that probably wasn't going to happen. So then I sort of, okay, well, what else have I enjoyed? What have I seen that I could do? So that's when I went into industry. So I completely changed again. So I just said, all right, let's try something else. So what's interesting about that is following your passion doesn't necessarily always lead to complete success and to a complete career. It doesn't have to.
It doesn't.
No, I do.
But still, not following it, you probably might regret, or probably be frustrated, or probably thinking how it was if it were to be a pilot, la la la.
Exactly. So you can say, oh my God, why didn't I ever try doing that? And of course, I did try it, and I had a fantastic 2.5 years. Had made some wonderful friends. Still in touch with my colleagues in the Royal Air Force. So it was a.
But it gives you more than that.
Yes, it gave me. In a technical way, it did, because it gave me some excellent training, actually. So I did 6 months of officer training, which I think has always been something that I've been able to rely on, particularly in very difficult times of my life. It develops resilience, it develops certain character traits, it trains you in leadership, and a degree of ability to deal with pressure and those things. So it was that in and of itself. We use the word forming. It was good. It was character forming for a 21-year-old to do that, and that's something that I'll always value. So what's interesting about it, that often in a long career, as you know, Theodora, you'll make a choice about something you're passionate about, and then you may change direction, but you haven't lost anything. You haven't lost things. You gain things from having made that choice and the work that you did. There's always something that you will have gained from that you can then take forward with you. When you're growing a garden, you grow things and then they die, and then you put them back on the garden to grow something new, and that's what can happen in a
definitely.
In a
so it all this character forming, with all these skills, what was the next?
Well, then I decided to have a look around and see what sort of things I could do going into industry, because the other thing that I'd done at university was I'd done a work placement. So as you were talking about doing other things. So exactly as the EduBiz do. So I'd spent 2-3 months in industry during my holidays, and I decided that I liked the idea of working in industry. So what I was looking for was a job that took me into industry. So I looked around, I applied for different jobs, and I was given one. So I took it.
What was it?
It was as a human resource advisor working for BP, the oil company in Aberdeen, in Scotland, when I had to get the map out and work out where Aberdeen was, and then decide, and they offered me a job. So that was the one I decided to take next.
So you, in a way or another, you were mentioning at the beginning, oriented to the others. So human resources looks like the place where you can actually, you could, and you still can, look to the others.
Indeed, and I think it's interesting that, you know, as you mature, and I was 24 by then, so I think I was still learning what my lifelong passions were, I guess, and this thing that has joined up the dots through my career is this idea of seeing others develop, of getting the best out of people and working out how people can be, how I can motivate others such that they can grow and they can develop and they can transform. And there's much of human resources that doesn't do that. Much of it is about technique and policy and practice. But the part I liked was the part that allows you to do that work. And that's what I did. And
were you allowed, or were you able to do that?
I was there for 5 years, and so what I chose to do, it was a choice actually that the company allowed me to do, was to take on a role of doing facilitation and training work. And that's where I started to do training and education in BP. And that was, so I started to do that. I started to run workshops for people on basic skills. I started to do leadership training. I started to do team training, team building training. And that's where, and that was in BP.
Everything was actually coming from previous experiences.
Some of it.
University, then pilots.
Yeah.
Okay. Oriented to the other, because when you are in the army and in IRF, definitely you have to pay attention firstly, and in the same time to the others.
You do.
It's a crew. It's a teamwork.
You do, absolutely. And you learn a lot of that in the forces. So some of that was transferred, some of it I was learning while I was there. And what I was learning actually was the skill and the technique of being a trainer, a mentor, and a coach, and a manager.
Can be learned, or you have to be born with certain skills?
No, not at all. You can learn to do that.
Being the trainer.
I mean, maybe some people are naturally better at it than others. But no, I was very much not somebody who you would consider to be a natural trainer. I'm an introvert personality. I found it very hard to start with, to stand up in front of people and to teach them. It was a really hard thing for me to learn to do.
And how you did it?
I was very, very nervous about it.
How you did it? I mean, a lot of young people watching on us right now, and they are having the same problem.
Absolutely.
How can I stand up? I mean, you are an introvert. A lot of it, not only EduBiz, but young ones are introvert. What they can do?
They can learn the technique.
Okay, so there is a technique. So good news, you don't have to be born. There are techniques that can be learned.
You can.
Okay.
You can. There are skills that you can learn from others who know how they're doing. And one of the things that I did was, and it sounds simple, but I did a train the trainer course. So it was other trainers teaching me how to do the basics in a classroom, how to control myself, my own voice, how to engage with an audience, how to structure a training program, how to deal with problem behaviors in the room, how to keep things interesting and engaging. So all of those basic, those are things you can learn to do. Yeah. Absolutely. And you start with those, and that gives you the confidence to then develop your own personality as a trainer or as an educator.
After learning, you have to practice. And the practice is going to give you a lot.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work.
Anything that you do well involves a lot of work.
Okay. So
for most people, unless you're really, really talented. Some people are blessed with talent, but yeah, anything that you want to do well involves a lot of work and a lot of practice.
Yeah, but being talented without working.
Well, it's a loss to society.
So with all this trainer courses, techniques, learning, doing it, practicing it, of course, probably at the beginning, not being the best, not being as you want it to be, being nervous and all this.
Yeah.
You've been in this industry, in this area of human resources for more than 10 years.
It was around 10 years in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about that. Doing different sorts of, as you know, different sorts of jobs in the same field of
Was only
people
in UK?
development. No. So after I'd been in Aberdeen, by that time, I have to mention, of course, I'd got married while I was in Aberdeen. And my wife and I then moved to London. Both of us managed to get jobs in London. And then I took, I think, my first senior manager role in London as
What age was that?
20, I have to work this out, 28.
Senior manager job.
Yeah, so it was a site
Very
manager role. I think I was the youngest manager on site by 5 years, actually. But it was a traditional organisation where people stayed a long time. So I was quite different. I came in as I remember thinking I was at least 5 years younger than any other senior manager on the site.
How was that to be the young ones, the big manager, and all your employees or your staff being at least 5?
Completely terrifying.
For you?
To start with, yeah. Oh yeah, probably for them as well, but yeah, for me. And I had a personnel team of, they were called personnel in those days before it was called HR. That's how traditional it was. And I had a team of maybe 30, and the site was perhaps 2,000 engineers.
Engineers.
Technical, it's an engineering.
Very technical.
Very technical. Yeah, it was very technical. I've worked with engineers for a lot of my career. They're wonderful people, and I always have a great respect for what our engineers do for us. So yes, that was the situation, and the biggest challenge I had was being a manager of people who were much older and much more experienced than I was. That was a major challenge, and some of them took advantage of that.
A lot of young ones in EduBiz are in a situation in which they are proposing projects and they are involved in different projects, and not only in EduBiz, and they have to interact with adults.
Yeah.
And they have to discuss serious things and involve them in serious projects. What can you tell them, to young ones, if you are a young one and you have adults working with you, or people who have more experience and more years of life than you have? What have you done? Something that can help them? Because it's a matter of also of trust.
It is. It is a great question. There are two or three. There are probably some things you don't do with adults as a young. The first thing you don't do is try and tell them what to do. Actually, as a general rule, anyway. But that's something you absolutely don't do with people who are working. And if you're coming into a situation as a younger person with older people, probably they've been more experienced than you are. There's a really good thing you can do, which is ask for their help. Okay. So the first thing you do is look, I'm not as old as you. You've got more experience than me. I really need your help here to succeed. I need your support. So you appeal to their. Sometimes as a parent, they perhaps look at you as being a young person, maybe even as their child. So you appeal to their good side to ask for their help. So you definitely don't say, right, I'm going to tell you what to do here, because that will not work. So asking for their help is great. That works, I think, on many occasions. But I think the other thing that you can do as a young person is understand and realize that just because you're young doesn't mean to say that you don't have something to offer. Because as you and I know, those young people now, they know much more about how the world works now than us old people. Because the world is theirs, not ours. So they will understand the values of the next generation. They will understand what the future holds. They will probably be more able to understand the technology that's transforming work. So to realize and to understand that you have so much to offer as a young person to those older people. And a good example, actually, I was talking to a man who runs a building company, and he makes his young apprentices, 18, 19-year-olds, work with some of the older builders, the 40-year-olds. And he said the 40-year-olds learn much more from the 18-year-olds about things like using TikTok.
Yeah.
So the older ones act as mentors, but the relationship is both ways. They learn from each other. And that's a good thing to know, that you will be learning from each other, and the adults can learn as well as a lot from the older adults, from the younger people.
Accepting from the beginning, even if you are the manager, that you can learn from.
You can learn from each other,
from
actually.
Each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's a good way of establishing
and
that relationship.
And recognizing their experience, position. Yeah. Okay.
Indeed.
So, John, UK, get married in UK with your wife.
Yeah.
Karen, by the way, in London.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Well, what happened was one day Karen came home and said, I've just been offered a job in the south of France, but I know you won't take it, so I've turned them down. And I said, you've done what? Because we both love France. We've been on holiday there. And I said, maybe just go back, ask them if the job is still available, and then let's negotiate, which is what she did. So she got offered the job in the south of France. I gave my job up, and I moved to the south of France with her.
In 1995.
1995. So I had no job. I just went because we wanted to live in France. So I gave my job up, my career, to go to France with her.
You knew French?
Nope. No, I didn't know French. I'd done A-level, 16-year-old French, but it wasn't very useful.
So you moved in another country without...
With no job. And
with no job,
yep.
Only Karen's job.
Yep.
And with no language.
Yep, just because we know we like the place. And
you like the place.
And some of my, because I had a great job in London, of course, and then my colleagues were saying, God, you're brave to do that. I don't know, maybe it was. And I could, if I made a change, which meant I could have stayed in that career and perhaps carried on to very senior levels. But I didn't. I basically started again.
You started again?
Indeed. And I've done that a few times.
We were talking about starting again. Pilot, then human resources, then moved in London, senior position in a company, and then
going to France. Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Where do you think that you have this from, this spirit of adventure or this spirit of looking, trying opportunities, not, daring to go for?
And then giving things up and starting again, actually, which I've done several times. And I sometimes think that it may be from my early life. My parents went to Australia when I was 2 years old and stayed for 4 years. So my earliest memories are growing up in Australia, in the south of Australia. And then they did the opposite. After 4 years, they were established, they were successful, they'd found jobs. They went with nothing. They had nothing when they got there, and were very poor actually when they started in Australia. And then my dad found a good job. He was doing well. I was going okay. I was in school. It was a lovely environment to be brought up in. And then they gave it up and came back to England. And they had their reasons for doing that, but they just changed again. And I think perhaps somewhere there's not this ability to have the courage just to suddenly change your life again, and not to go with the norm and what people would expect you to do, but what seems to be and what feels to be the right thing to do at that time. And they felt that was the right thing to do. And well, it's done okay for me. So yeah. And sometimes we can, I think, be driven on rail tracks almost, the standard thing, the getting promotion and staying with your career and staying in the same place. And actually, sometimes you don't live life that way. So.
Yeah, and it also has to do with the early age models or examples, probably.
Yeah. Maybe it is, yeah. Perhaps it is.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So there I found myself in France with no job.
South of France, no job, no French, but with a wife.
Indeed. Who was working so we could live. And so, we went for 6 months actually to try it. And then, of course, as you know, 17 years later and 3 children, we came back, to England. So, so what did I do? Well, I had a time when I wasn't doing very much, but I had a friend that I'd worked with when I was in BP doing leadership development who said, come and work for us. Do some more of that. So I started to do, back in the UK, some more leadership development work, running courses, traveling back to the UK.
So and then I saw traveling back
and forwards.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I realized there was a lot of international businesses in the south of France and I could do the same there. So I set up a company to do that in the south of France.
So you became an entrepreneur.
I had my own business doing leadership
in the south of France.
In the south of France, yeah.
You were already been able to speak French.
I learned French.
You learned French.
My training was in English.
Okay.
Although after many years, I was also training in French. So, but to start with, the courses were in English. But of course, to live in France, you have to learn the language. So I learned French while I was there.
Yeah.
Living there is always a good way of learning.
So it's very important. You were mentioning friends and people you worked previously.
Yeah.
To keep the good relationships.
Absolutely.
Everywhere you are going.
Absolutely. The people who you know are important to you, and sometimes also you're important to them.
How you know they are important?
Oh, you just know.
You just know.
Yeah, you just know. You know the value that you get from, and actually that's probably everybody. But of course, you can't possibly keep all of those up. But most of them you bring. It doesn't matter how many times you change your career or your job or your location. They come with you. Yeah, they come with you. And these days it's much easier because of social media and being able to keep in touch on LinkedIn, for example. In those days it was harder to do that. We had email just about, but it was harder to do that. Anyway, but your social network moves with you, I think.
It's about you. It's not about your job, your position.
That's right. And it's really important to know that. Another example actually was exactly when I was in France. So I'd been there a year, 1996. I was in a pub, as you do, in Antibes, in the south of France, and I met an Englishman who had been there for a while, and we got talking. And he said, well, what you do is really interesting for me because I run an MBA program at the local business school, and I think you could teach some of our students on business and communication. Would you like to do it? And I said, I have never taught students. Up to that point, I'd never done it. But I'll try. So I started teaching on the MBA program at a university, at a business school in the south of France. And I enjoyed it. They enjoyed what I did because had a lot of direct business experience. And they recruited me as a member as a member of the faculty, yeah.
Professor of the MBA.
Yeah.
So everything till that point, actually, leadership, teamwork, business-oriented, business development helped you.
I was able
to. And you arrived in the education,
indeed,
in the formal education, and in the in academia.
Exactly, and it all came from one conversation over a beer in a pub where I met someone.
You approached him, or he approached you?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I think we were sitting opposite each other. We both heard we were speaking English, and we sort of turned around and started to speak.
Yeah, so out in a group of French people.
Exactly. And this gentleman's name, Ken Pope, we're still in touch. And the strange part about that, later on, I gave him a job.
Okay.
so we stayed in touch, and that's 30-something years later.
The wheel is turning.
Exactly right.
You never know.
No. So I ended up working for the business school. Eventually, I ended up running the MBA program.
Okay,
but that was a little time later. But it also took me into my academic career. So I started to think about my doctorate at that time. So the end of the 1990s.
So after that experience, you applied for a PhD.
Yes, I was still doing my training as well. By the way, I kept the business up because I loved doing the leadership development work, the team development work, and some of that, of course, I brought to my students. So I used to run.
So you were running your business,
yeah,
and you were running this MBA, teaching,
yeah,
and then.
And I was still working for the company in the UK as well. By the way, coming back to the UK to do things. So.
Okay, so you had actually 3 main directions.
And my son was born in the middle of it.
And your son was born?
Yeah.
How come? Busy dad.
You want to know how my son was born? Or? It was a busy time.
It's another type of lessons that we can teach.
Indeed. It was a busy time, indeed. But actually, I didn't feel busy. It just felt like I was doing all of the things I wanted to do. So it wasn't, it didn't feel like too much. It really didn't. They were all kind of complementary with each other as well.
And interconnected.
Indeed, yeah.
So if you have passion there, if you like it, you don't feel it too much?
I don't think so, no. No. You know, the question, what makes you get up in the morning? You don't have to have anything that's driving you that, because you know what it is that you're doing, that's I think another important lesson.
So little by little, turn to academia.
Yeah,
exactly. As
exactly.
a teacher, MBA, then your PhD.
Yeah.
It was in the UK or in France?
It was in the UK. So I decided that I wanted to do a PhD. Unlike Tony, I decided I wanted to do it in English. And so I was finding a way of getting to a university and being enrolled in a university. And then I met another one of my lifelong friends at the business school, who was also happened to be British, actually. Many of them weren't, but he happened to be British. And he was teaching on the MBA in the business school. And memorably, he was teaching when 9/11 happened. And it was a very memorable period, because he had started doing his teaching in strategy, and on the Monday, 9/11 was on the Tuesday, and he switched within 24 hours his course to talk about crisis management. And it's exactly what the students needed. Many of them were American. Many of them were absolutely traumatized by what had happened. And he turned his course around within 24 hours. And I thought that this is an interesting guy. So I got to know David, and we were talking about what was going on. And I was saying I'd like to do my doctorate. And he said, actually, I'm a visiting professor at Lancaster University in the UK. And they will allow you to do your doctorate remotely from France and study in the UK. And I think I would, A, I will supervise you, and B, I know someone else who would like to be. So that's how I enrolled at the University of Lancaster.
How important people are.
Incredible.
We are incredibly important, one
Indeed.
for that.
And David, who is now in his 80s, he's still a wonderful person. I'm seeing him.
You're
next.
still in touch with him.
I'm going to see him.
Definitely.
I'm going to see him next
kind
week.
Of persons.
Yeah, indeed. So that's 24 years later, I guess. So that's how I started my doctorate in 2002 at Lancaster in the UK.
The idea of doctorate was that you thought at that period that you'd like to be in an academia, to have a professorship or teaching.
I liked the business school environment, that connection with business, that the academic elements to business, but also I'd spent some time thinking about what subject I was passionate about, because to do a PhD, you absolutely have to love the subject and be passionate about it. It will carry through many years of study. You have to be really engaged, and I found the connections that I realized I wanted to study for my PhD. And that's what I did.
So you, with more than 10 years of experience in working with businesses, for businesses, and developing projects as an entrepreneur for
Indeed,
businesses.
and in my own business, yeah.
In your own business, actually, with the spirit of adventure, with the spirit of caring for the others, from being a pilot, with all this, it was absolutely probably one of the natural, a choice, the contextual. What was it? Is it that it was your choice, it was the context, and how you made this decision to turn to academia, to turn again?
It didn't feel like a decision, actually, Theodora. It really didn't. It felt like through some, in English we say serendipity, some things come together for reasons that you can't explain. Providence, you can say. I think through providence, like the conversation in the pub, for example, it changed the direction of my life, and my life has not been the same since I had that conversation, and I moved into this academic world. Although I've never seen myself as an academic in the way of pure research, and I don't think of myself in that way, really. I don't sure how I think of myself as anything, actually. But nevertheless, at that time, I found myself really, really wanting to study a particular subject and felt I could make a contribution to it, and that was the PhD. And it also helped me, obviously, with the other things I was doing, which is teaching in the business school, doing my consulting work, and still working with students, working with businesses, working with employees in those businesses to help them get the best out of themselves. So I was still doing all those things.
Yeah, but you mentioned something. You had the conversation in the pub with David.
Yeah.
Young ones are also having conversations in pubs, or probably less because they are more on devices.
Yeah.
How you turn, you have to have something. I mean, there are many opportunities in life. How you turn them in action, in concrete things, because you have to be ready for that. You have to probably have some skills. You have to be You have to have something.
Actually, I don't think you. I think if you're objective, when you talk to someone, if your objective is to turn it into something concrete, it's probably the wrong objective because you're being instrumental about the conversation. Okay. And I think you just have those conversations and never be completely open. It's a relationship that you're building. That's all it is. What your choice is to continue that relationship. That's the choice. It's not about trying to get something out of it. So classically for young people, you're probably wanting to look at, getting a career, finding a job. And it's a mistake to talk to people to find a job. You don't do that. What you do is you talk to people. So they may come to you and I, for example, we have some experience, right? We're not going to find them a job, but we may be able to give them some advice or to perhaps say something to them that makes them think a bit about how to do it. Or, often likely, put them in touch with someone else who can possibly find them something. But if you go in with the objective of finding a job, then it's not going to work because they will see through that. The objective is to say, how can I add value to that person through this relationship I have with them? And how will they be able to add value to me? Because it's an exchange. Nothing more than that. It's another interesting relationship to nurture. Yeah. And these days it's easier to do that because you have social media. In those days it was a little harder because easy? Maybe perhaps different now with the technology that allows you to do. I think the technology allows you to keep in touch with perhaps more people than you could in those days. But keeping the relationship and nurturing it, no matter what it is and how unpromising it is, you're never quite sure where it's going to take you.
Is the happiness and the joy of sharing with someone and of adding value with what you have, what you say to the other, and vice versa?
I think so, yes. It's getting value purely out of the contact and the relationship that you have with that person. And always the key thing is being open to that. It's just being open to it. It's not knowing actually that the concierge that you meet in the street is somebody that actually will help you with getting settled in the region. And it's somebody, if you'd ignored them, you would never have got that help. To pick an example that you mentioned to me a little earlier, Theodora, it's being open to everyone who you come into contact with and thinking, actually, maybe this is a relationship that will turn into something. Maybe it won't. Many of them don't, but it's just that openness to the potential that those relationships can offer.
It's an important skill that probably we should think how to teach, or not necessarily how to teach, how to facilitate for young generation.
Very much so.
An important skill for young generation is this, or facilitating for them, this capacity of just enjoying the possibility of interacting with the others and just considering everyone.
Yes.
With that in mind, with all your experiences, you continue in the career in the academic. Where to after the PhD?
Indeed. Well, so careers don't always run smoothly. And something that has also, I think, defined my career is that I have occasionally disagreed with or fallen out with a boss that I've been working for. And it's happened to me actually a few times. And I think the first time it happened was when I was working at the business school in France, which, as you know, went through 2 or 3 lives actually as a business school. It didn't stay the same. It was bought by and changed its name. I ended up working for somebody who I felt didn't respect my ability, didn't allow me to do what I wanted. I don't think his approach to management was a good one. I don't think he was particularly open in his style. So I left the business school, and that was in 2006. So the year I got my PhD from Lancaster, I also left the school in France, which then left me with no job. Again. So what happened was another person, not the same one that I talked about, but another person who I'd worked with in the business school had moved on to do something which in those days was quite new. So he joined a company called Laureate Online Education. It's an American company, an education company. It's still
online education?
Online education. So he'd taken this role in Laureate, and he contacted me. I think he phoned me actually and said, I think there's maybe a job here for you. It's running an MBA program, but it's an online MBA with the University of Liverpool, and our laureate has a partnership with the University of Liverpool. I need someone to run it. You can do that. You can do other things at the same time. So I thought, I'll try it. So that's what I started.
When was that?
2007. So I started in
2007.
2007.
Online education.
Yeah, in online education. So
something like avant-gardist?
In those days, yeah, relatively. So I think it had started up probably in the early 2000s as a thing. Yeah? So
all the time a visionary, opening the ways.
Also just being a bit opportunistic and knowing somebody that I got on well with, which is also important. I knew him, he knew me. Yeah, I worked with this guy. It looks interesting. I hadn't done anything online at that point, but I did know about running MBA programs because I'd just been doing that. So there was something of a fit there, but then something quite new to try. It also meant I could do it from France. So I could stay where I was. It was online. I could do it anywhere. So there was some convenience about it.
You were working remotely in 2007.
I was,
now,
completely.
After 70, 90 years old, we are talking about
it
remote
still seems a problem.
working.
Yeah, so I was doing it from then. So I started to do that in 2007. Learned a lot about online education, obviously. It was growing, so I was able to grow with it. And then for over a period of 2 or 3 years, by the way, I was still doing my executive education work as well. I kept that, my own company. I did that until 2010. I also took a role as a postdoctoral researcher at Lancaster following my PhD. So I did that for 3 years. So at the same time as doing my postdoc work in Lancaster, I was running this online MBA.
And your own business.
Yes.
So
which got smaller, just because of the time.
Yeah. So you were working.
I also had 3 children
constantly
by then as well,
on different projects.
Yeah. It was still juggling, and by that time we had 3 children as well. Yeah, who wanted to see their dad occasionally. So that was nice because I spent some time at home. But I was going to Lancaster for my postdoc work, and I was going to Liverpool for the MBA because they expected to see me, and I was relationship building in Liverpool as well. So I spent quite a lot of time in my home city, which is Liverpool. So that was for 3 years. I was doing this balancing work. In 2010, I finished my postdoc work at Lancaster, and Laureate offered me a bigger job because we were expanding, and by that time they had many other online programs. So I became a director of academic delivery online for all of the management programs that Laureate was running with the University of Liverpool, which by that time had reached something like 10,000 students. So the MBA, we launched a DBA, which I was part of designing, and we had several master's programs at the University of Liverpool. And my main job then became the relationship management with the university, as well as the academic delivery of those online programs. That was 2010. So my job got bigger.
Then I know Lincoln. When I met you, you invited me to Lincoln.
Mm-hmm. That was 6 years later.
How come that you arrived there in Lincoln?
Well,
Lincoln, by the way, it's a beautiful city.
It is.
In UK. I've seen about 4. Yeah, mostly Lincoln, but it's beautiful. So if you have the chance to go,
indeed,
you have to.
So 1 or 2 things happened in between to take me to Lincoln. So the first was in 2012. I was then offered a bigger job, which was Chief Academic Officer, because by then I'd negotiated another online partnership with the University of Roehampton in London. So I was also going to London, but that job did not allow me to continue to work from France, realistically. I had 2 universities in the UK, so Laureate wanted me to move to the UK. We had young children. My wife also decided that she wanted to get back with her family. So in 2012, after 17 years, we moved from the south of France back to England.
A little bit like your parents. Back.
Maybe, absolutely right.
After a period.
So
for school,
yeah,
for the education of your children.
Indeed.
You appreciated a lot the UK education.
We did. But also we had a wonderful life in France, but we decided that this was the right time for different reasons to go back to the UK. So I came back to the UK, and I could live anywhere really, because I was at Liverpool and London. We found somewhere in between the two, and my wife wanted to live near her sister, who is down the road from where we live now. So we moved to a part of the UK that we didn't know, but we settled there and was between the two universities that I was working with. It was always
so friends, persons, important persons, and family as well.
And it was also
like the main pillars of the life.
Exactly. So I did that bigger job from 2012 to 2015. I then was given another role, which was Vice President of Innovation, which is something that I've always done for...
So from entering in a few years, you arrived to be a Vice President.
At Laureate. So I did that for 12 months. They then appointed another Chief Executive Officer that I was working for, who I didn't get on with, who was making the wrong decisions for the business. And I decided it's time to leave. So I looked around, what can I do now? And Lincoln was close. And this job came up, which was the head of the business school at the University of Lincoln. And I loved what I saw at Lincoln. I loved the person that I saw I'll be working for, the Vice Chancellor. I applied for the job, I got it. And that was the next 7 years of my life, being at the University of Lincoln.
And now, another mission. Because
guess what?
Guess what? Life is full of discovering and of learning about yourself, and then of course of action.
Indeed. What's interesting about that though Theodora, is again, the thing that we were talking about, those networks, those social networks that you have coming with you, the same thing happened. So it sounds like I've done lots of very different jobs, but actually some of those people have come with me, and a lot of those relationships I've preserved even over 30 years. And so when I moved to Lincoln, of course, one of the things I did at Lincoln was bring in online programs. So a lot of the people who'd been teaching with me at Laureate came with me and started teaching for me at Lincoln. So those relationships maintained. One of my David Weir that I mentioned, who was my doctoral supervisor, he became a visiting professor for me. One of the professors that I'd worked at Liverpool became a visiting professor for me. So there are those relationships, even if you may change jobs or even change countries, the ones that you really want and the ones that you both get value from, they come with you. And that's happened again this time. As you know, I've now changed again. So.
I can imagine in 2020, when the lockdown was just coming from day to another, you were ready with the online education.
Which started at the beginning of that year, which anyone would think I planned it, but of course I didn't.
Started the
online programs in February 2020.
In February 2020, and in March lockdown. Yeah, I've told you, a visionary.
No, it was your luck.
You think it's only about luck.
Yeah, sometimes luck.
Or the opportunity, who seems to be in the right moment, in the right way, and with the right people.
Sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes.
Providence.
Maybe Providence. We can discuss that.
Probably you don't know, but now Craig is starting a new mission in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Back in his home
city.
Home city. It's not a town, it's a city. In Liverpool, Hope University. Mm-hmm. And I feel it, I've never been. I feel it very interesting, and definitely it's intriguing.
So why do you think it's intriguing?
Because I always had the impression that harbors are bringing a mix of cultures, of people from different parts of the world, which making it more diverse, more cosmopolitic, and in the same time intriguing, because you want to discover, you want to still understand what's the initial core of that place, and how is influenced by all this mixture of...
And yet you've never been to Liverpool.
No.
But you've just described the city perfectly, because it does indeed give you that mix of cultures, of histories. There's always already a very international presence in Liverpool.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you're starting from that multicultural, historical, industrial background, and it's a city that's been through many histories and rebirths itself, and is still growing and still developing. Some very, very poor parts of Liverpool, some of the poorest parts of Europe in Liverpool still. But a city that's also growing, it's getting a lot of investment. So it's just a wonderful, exciting place to be. Look at Eurovision 4 weeks ago. So,
indeed.
Yeah.
It's like Transylvania in a way, because it's developing, it's rediscovering, and it's so interesting to grow with the flow
Indeed.
around.
Indeed. And I joined a university, which is the third university in Liverpool. There are three main universities, all with Liverpool in the title. And it's a small one. It's been running the similar way for many years. And just been taken over by a new Vice-Chancellor who's been there 3 months, who was the person I worked with at the University of Roehampton when we developed the online programs together. So she and I know each other really well. So I went through the formal application process, but I know that I wanted to work with her again. And so that's an important relationship. And something that I have learned through all of those different jobs that I've done, the relationship that you have with your boss is hugely important, and you need to make sure that you're always in line with what they're doing. You can disagree on many things, but fundamentally you have to be in line with what's going on. And there comes a time when you are no longer in line with them, and that's the time to leave. And I did that. I've done that 3 times already in my career.
So it's about values. It's about principles.
Absolutely
it's about
right.
Systemic way of feeling, doing things.
Yeah. It's not about agreeing with them all the time, because one of my favorite expressions is when 2 people in an organization agree all the time, probably one of them is unnecessary. It is indeed about that feeling that you're in the same boat, that you're approaching things in roughly the same way, that you both want the same things, and that you have the same intentions, that you sort of get on in a level where you feel like you can work together. Those are really important things. And if it becomes to the point where you feel that's wrong, then it's probably time to leave. And it's usually not the boss that leaves, funnily enough. So now I have a new boss that I think I'm going to work really well together. And I'm bringing some skills that I know she needs. And I'm just so looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So
it looks like a montagne russe, your career, but in reality, it's pretty much complementary. Because you were starting, being a pilot, it's something probably different, but still gives you the skills and the way of thinking and the mentality and the way of the attitude and the value for work and for the others. But then it was human resources, which is people-oriented, training and education, non-formal, mainly in companies. Then academia, then research, training and forming characters of the young generation.
Yeah, and some scholarship in there as well that I try and do when I want to. And those are red threads for my career. You're absolutely right. Those are things that you can track through what I've done, which have stayed quite constant in many changes. The other thing that I think, in my most recent move, the job I've taken now is smaller than my last one. Yeah? So you look at it. So what I've not done is taken conventional choices about the next bigger, better job, the higher salary. I don't do that. That's not me. So what I look for is something that I think I can make a big contribution to, that I can feel at home with, that I can add value to, and that I can help people grow, help an institution grow, help it transform, help it change, help it achieve its potential, help the people achieve their potential. And for me, that's fantastic. And there are so many things now that I've already started to think about, including with you, that we can bring to the University of Liverpool Hope.
So the spirit of adventure and of opening new doors and new ways and of new horizons.
Indeed, and perhaps I can say of hope as well.
Of hope, indeed. Among all this, do you have time for your passion? What's your...
Yeah, that is my passion, though. All of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's part of it, certainly.
And do you have other passions, out of the work?
Oh, I do other things. Yeah, it's not all about that. I have to say, a lot of that has defined me as a person, and that can be very difficult when you're doing something like that and it stops, because then suddenly what defines you has gone. And that can be very challenging. And actually, when I left Lincoln, it was a very challenging period for me, because I was thinking, okay, well, who am I now? Actually, I went through that process. And it is a process you go through. It's like a process of grieving, of loss, that I knew was going to happen, but it was still very hard. So, when you put everything into your work, if that's what you call it, when you lose it, it's part of you goes. So that, I don't believe in work and life. Work is part of your life, right? So that was a big shock for me, and that's happened to me 2 or 3 times. So you have to be resilient enough to get through that and start again and think, okay, well, I'm going to take those things with me and find my next adventure. and that's what I've just done. So, but I do other things. Yeah, my children, of course, they're all getting older now.
Do you have time for your children?
They'd probably say no, but they're fine. They're all sane. They're all okay. So, and my youngest is now going to university himself. So, they seem to be relatively okay. And yeah, I run, as you know. So
yeah.
So mens sana in corpore sano.
In corpore sano.
Sound mind in a sound body. That's all you should pray for.
How all these things actually have helped you, in the sense that you were saying you find yourself asking yourself, after all these years of experiences in which you proved who you are, what's your values, asking yourself, who am I? Is it a question that we can expect to have sometimes in our life? Because when they are 16 or 18, it's a constant question that they have. Who am I? What's my passion? What are my values? So is it to expect to find the answer when you are 18, as the big pressure is put right now is on their shoulder to define who you are? Or you have it with you all your life? And
you reevaluate it all your life. I don't think you can ever suddenly say, I've found my passion, that's fine, it's done, it's okay, now I can do some other thing. No, you're reevaluating that all the time, I think. I think the difference is, as you get older, you have some more things that you can rely on, that you know you've done and that you know you're good at. So it's almost like that, laying things down for your future. When you're 18, you have less to rely on. You don't have so much life that you can say, yeah, that's what it is. So I think that's the only difference. It's experience. It's that you're always in the process of reevaluating that and learning new things. Yeah, like I learned from you.
So learning from each other, learning all your life, being open to ask yourself, who am I? Reevaluating all the time. So and then probably when you are 18, one of the main preoccupation should be to try as many things as possible. So and not only to try, but to achieve something, to finish the circle, so you can rely on something that you've done. That will make you and help you to discover yourself.
I think so too. Right? It's also probably worth saying that. I mean, I've described, my own circumstances, what the choices that I made and how I did things. That doesn't mean to say that every 17 or 18-year-old is going to do the same thing. We're talking to some of our EduBists today, and it's really interesting how some of them already seem to have a very clear idea about what they want to do with themselves. Not necessarily a job, but the sorts of things they want to do, and that's fantastic. I mean, I don't think I had that at 18. I don't think I have now, actually. But they do. So there may be some that do have that certainty, and that's fantastic. And what we need to do is encourage that, to make sure that they, within that certainty of a set of skills, perhaps, that they do make the right sort of choices, and that's where we can help them to guide them a little bit. Perhaps others need a bit more guidance because they don't necessarily know at that stage what they want to do. So I think people can. It's okay when you're 18 to be uncertain or to be certain. Either is fine. What probably is important is not to think that you're necessarily deciding the rest of your career. And some people are lucky; they perhaps become doctors, and their work is in the medical profession for their entire careers. Fantastic.
Like the big umbrella, but then within can do a lot of
They'll
things.
Maybe make some different choices.
Positions, different areas, different countries, as you did it.
For example, precisely right. And that will be dependent on their own personality. And some people will just want to stay a doctor for their entire life. Other people will feel like they can move into medical administration, or into policy, or into teaching. Exactly. So that's their choice, but within the general medical profession. So what you're not doing is fixing yourself for the rest of your life. You may be thinking about the next 2 to 5 years. And something that I think is always valuable, it's something of a cliche, but the question, what do I want to be doing in 5 years? And not necessarily a job, but the kinds of things that you want to be doing in 5 years. And I do remember one point when I was in France thinking, it would be really nice to be running a business school. I don't know why. I just thought, yeah, that I could see myself doing that. And I thought I could contribute doing that. And I thought I would enjoy doing that. And 5 years later, after deciding that, I found myself running a business school. Now, it was through a route that I would never have understood or guessed. But I had that somewhere in me where I kind of thought that through. And even now at 58, I'm thinking, okay, I'm 63. How do I imagine myself when I'm 63? And just doing that 5-year thing, just doing that little bit of, you might call it visioning. When you're 18, when your difference between 18 and 23 is enormous. Just thinking, all right, when I'm 23, what kind of things would I be doing? Do I have a partner? Where am I going to be living? What sort of work am I going to be doing? Just to think through that a little bit. I think it's always a valuable thing to do.
18 is just the beginning.
Only.
Craig, you've been in different leadership positions. Over your career, you've met a lot of leading persons in your life.
Mm-hmm.
What is leadership for you?
Do you want the full MBA course of 8 weeks?
Yeah.
Or these thousands of books that have been written on the subject?
We can send some links in description for that.
Right. I do think there is one thing that characterizes it, and everything else comes from it. And I said it a little earlier, it's being about other regarding. It is not about you as a leader. And the extent that you can make your leadership task about others, then you're probably going to be a successful leader, I think. Now, there are many other things to being a leader, not least of which actually sometimes being a good manager, good at organizing, good at motivating, good at performance managing, good at project management. Many of those things I'm not very good at, actually. But I think the essence of leadership is really being passionate about getting the best out of other people. Now, that can often be done in difficult circumstances, and there's some elements of that which is about being kind to them, just straight kindness. So sometimes I've had to make very difficult decisions about people who are under my charge, and, for example, where they've been losing their job, possibly because of my decision. Right? So this is not necessarily always an easy task, but you can still do that with kindness and with regard for them, and with thought about their well-being, and with thought about what they do next, and those sorts of things. So I think always being, however you can, thinking about what other people will benefit from your leadership. I think that's a good place to start anyway. And some of the things we've been talking today about, understanding who they are, listening to them, giving them, when you're talking to them, making sure that they're the most important person in the world for that period, making sure you're listening to them, understanding what their motivations are, being a coach, being a mentor. All of those, I think, come from that basic idea that it is not about you, really, fundamentally. It's about the other. And that probably is the place to start.
Is it because a leader is not a leader if they are not people
being
around?
Followed. Indeed. There's a truism there. Yeah.
So you cannot be a leader if you don't have the followers.
No, exactly. And that by the way, all of that, I think there are some fortunate people that maybe discover that when they're young. The sooner you can understand that, because when you're young, everything's about you often, right? But actually, to start thinking in that way, even just in small ways, when you're young, just to try to test that. Okay, for once, actually, I'm going to think what you want. What is it that interests you? What are you passionate about? How can I help you in your career? What can I do for you rather than the other way around? That's not a bad place to start, actually, on developing some of those relationships that may well last you for your whole career.
So even the way you ask the question, probably that can be the easiest way to start with.
I think so. And it will also lead you probably to some difficult career choices like mine, where you're not necessarily taking the most obvious choice, actually. So I think that's probably a place to start. And will help you develop those long-lasting social relationships as well. And it is also still, unfortunately, I have to say, very rare. So when you do develop those skills, you stand out.
There is not big competition up there.
No. I have to say also that you're at risk of being exploited.
Because your care and interest for the others can be considered disconsidered,
Can
disregarded.
Yeah, people can take advantage of it. But I would say that of the 100 people that you do that with, there may be 99 will benefit from it, that you'll benefit from it, that you'll grow together, and there'll be one person who decides that you're weak.
So for that one person, sometimes can put you down.
Yep. And sometimes for that one person, you may have to take a different approach. But they need to prove that that's what they're doing first, because sometimes you don't necessarily understand their motivations. And I am thinking of one or two cases where people have decided that because I take that approach as a leader, that I'm weak. It's not about weakness.
Yeah, it's always saying that showing your vulnerability, it's not being weak.
No.
It's
exactly.
being human, and it's firstly.
Indeed.
And then being with the other and for the other.
Indeed. You mentioned a word earlier, Theodora, trust. Mm-hmm. And trust is a really important idea in this, I think. So if you're really trusting someone, you make yourself vulnerable to that person. Because trusting them means that you believe that they can do things without you having to be watching them all the time, right? I mean, that's basically what trust is. So what you're doing is, and particularly as a leader, if you're trusting someone to do something, often you're making yourself vulnerable, because if they do it wrong, often it's your fault as the leader, right? So there is inevitably you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position, and that can be uncomfortable. And often you have no reason to trust someone. And I hear young leaders saying, no, I'll wait until they prove that I can trust them before I give them my trust. No, it's the wrong way. You trust them regardless. You meet them for the first time, you trust them. And allow them to prove that they don't deserve your trust. That's the way around it has to go. And that's also about that other regarding thing. Yeah. Because saying to someone, I'm not going to trust you until you prove it, that's about you. It's not about them. It's making yourself less vulnerable. That's not the point.
But even in the legal world, it's the presumption of not being guilty.
Indeed,
so
it's the presumption of innocence.
Yeah, that's the basis of Roman law. So.
Yeah, it is.
But we tend to forget that.
We do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do.
How do you see the future? Where do you see the humanity going to?
That's rather a large question to
No, really, how you see the 5 years? Because you were saying that you are thinking in 5 years.
Well, perhaps I'll pick one obvious thing that's been talked a lot about recently, which is artificial intelligence. And there's been lots of predictions of the death of the human race and so forth. I don't believe any of those things. I really don't. Not to say that there isn't some risk of the development of new technology. I mean, we've seen that over decades. The development of nuclear technology had the potential to wipe out the human race. The developments in biology has had the potential to wipe out the human race. And here we have another one that has the potential to wipe out the human. I have a fundamental optimistic belief that we will find ways of using that technology for the benefit of the human race. Now, I'm not a technologist, and people far cleverer than me will find what those ways are. But we will find that, and ultimately artificial intelligence will have a transformative effect, possibly even the next 5 to 10 years, on the working lives of these young people that we're working with. And we need their help to decide what that is. Whatever it is will be wonderful and probably will enhance our working lives in the same way that the spinning jenny did in the 18th century. In the same way that the computers did. I'm still old enough to remember that the arrival of the computers, everyone was predicting that we'd all have to work 3 days a week because there was no work enough to go around. In the 1970s, I remember that. Of course, it never happened, but that's what people thought about computers. What we think about artificial intelligence now is likely to be completely wrong. But what we do need is our young people to work with us to understand its effects and for them to benefit from it. So I think it's wonderful, and it's just the next technology revolution that is going to transform our lives.
Are the young generation you're mentioning a lot ready for this? And how you said to get them together with us, so we are actually building all this, the future, together with them.
Yeah.
Now, not waiting for them.
They're building it together with us, I think.
Okay. So today, how ready you see them?
As ready as any 18-year-old generation is ready for the future. Probably not very, but that's always been the case. There's nothing different now than the generation that were faced with, working with computers for the first time in the workplace. That's just a generational thing. That generation are never ready, but they'll do it.
So why then all this, especially from those who were in the 70s in their career and they face the computers and everything, they are so afraid that this new generation is not ready?
Yeah, because they're old. And they don't know that generation. They don't know that generation. No, I feel really strongly about this, Deidre. I mean, at the university, I work with 18-year-olds, and they are, I mean, just talking to the EduBiz today, I am blown away with the talent. And you know, they're ready. They're as ready as any generation for what's to come. They absolutely are. And all we need to do is help them and get out of their way. You know, with all of those existential threats, climate change, advent of AI, and it looks like quite a dark world out there. They'll deal with it. They will absolutely deal with it. And it's just up to it's up to us to stop, talking about the nightmare scenarios and just help them to be successful in this world.
What's their strongest or biggest strength?
The generation that we're talking about. What's their biggest strength? Perhaps compared with other generations, you mean? That we perhaps didn't have?
Compare, and really, nowadays.
I think their biggest strength is the diversity that they have as a group of young people now. What do I mean by that? I think every previous generation has, to some extent or other, but they've been like each other. So, you grow up in a place where everyone's like you, broadly speaking, unless you do things like move to another country, but that's been quite a small group. Now, through the use of technology, they have exposure to diversity, to difference, to people who are not like them, and they embrace it. They absolutely embrace it. Whether that's diversity of sex or religion or race or color, whatever the diversity of thinking, they have, because technology has given them that ability to be exposed to and to work with young people from all backgrounds across the world. That is a huge strength that I think they get, they have taken for granted. They believe that it's natural to them, and something that was not natural to previous generations. That is a massive strength, and they can use the benefit of that network, that worldwide network, to change the world.
Yeah, so diversity.
I think so, yeah.
And probably
and the acceptance of that diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Acceptance, but firstly, confronting your way of thinking from your background, from your cultural background, family background. Firstly, it's a confrontation because it might be different,
that's absolutely
which helps.
It can be felt very uncomfortable when you're confronted with difference and diversity, because suddenly you think, actually, there are other ways that people think that aren't like mine. But then you get over that, and the younger that you're exposed to that, the better. So, I remember my son when he was 10. We had a birthday party for him, and we had, as you do with kids' birthday parties, we gave them some little gummy sweets and things. And he said, no, my friends can't eat those. They're Muslim. Those sweets contain an additive which comes from pork. They can't eat them. We just never thought of it. My 10-year-old told me. So just a little example from my own son.
Considering already the diversity.
And for him, it was natural. He had friends in his class who were Muslim. They talked about it. It was completely natural that they were different from. Just a very small example that I remember from. He taught me something at that point as a 10-year-old. That's what they have.
Diversity. We are talking a lot about diversity, about you confronting yourself.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, accepting, embrace it, learning from each other. Yeah. Discovering yourself through this exposure to different people. And then, put yourself to work, to do something, not just to remain. And relationships among them. There is so many things that we can still continue discussing. But for the moment, I'd like if you say, like a message for the youth from Romania, and not only, because it's going to be English and then with Romanian translation, but for young ones, then for parents, because not all parents are that optimist as you are,
of course,
considering the future.
Yeah.
And then for professors, for teachers who are having an important role in forming the character.
Okay, so let's start with the young people that we're working with. Well, I think we've covered many things, and in some ways this is the wrong thing to do, because you and I, here we are. I'm old. You're not old, but we're certainly older than them. Sitting talking about them rather than to them, actually, and I think for me, probably the one thing that maybe they should get from this is that they should absolutely have the confidence. Just because you're young, because you're 18, absolutely have the confidence that you can transform the world. In a big way, maybe, or in a small way. But you have that already. And it's just a question of letting it emerge. It's in there somewhere. So it's not to think like something that comes from the outside, right? Your power to change the world is already with you. And it's just a question of perhaps helping with others, finding what it is, letting it out. And that, I think, is perhaps also related to what I would say for parents and teachers, actually, because it presents a different way of thinking about learning. So the classic traditional way of thinking about learning, of course, is that young person, empty vessel, you have to fill it by giving them knowledge, right? And that's what professors do, right? They profess, they stand there and talk, and the young people listen, they write notes, and they soak it all in. Doesn't work. Not anymore. That's not how it works. What you're doing is launching them on a voyage of discovery, which is going to take them through their lives. And even by asking them things, you will be amazed about what they already know. So I think as a professor, it's helping them to bring out whatever's already inside them. They can find knowledge anywhere. Yeah? And you don't have to give them lectures anymore, because they will find it on the internet, and it will probably be better than anything you can give as a lecturer. It'll be better out there somewhere. So it's not about imparting knowledge anymore. It's about making sure that you're trying your best to inspire them to find what it is that they have inside them and to bring it out, and to guide, encourage, support them. Maybe also to, whatever your academic expertise is, to craft it in such a way that you're telling a story that is of interest to them. And that's a very different way of thinking about the teaching role, right? But I think it's also similar for parents. Isn't it disappointing how, even today, we still hear about parents who are trying to guide their children into paths that they think is the right path for them, and not what their child thinks is the right path for them. And that, I think, also is gone. And that exists in different parts of the world in different ways. You hear it a lot. And it's actually, of course, because parents want their best for their child. But what they think is the best for their child isn't actually, unfortunately, what is the best for their child. And what tends to happen, and if I may, I'll give an example from some young people I was working with in India when I was there. India was such a wonderful country, apart from Romania, of course, one of my favourite countries in the world. And I was talking to a class of sixth formers in India, and they're very well dressed, wonderful uniforms. They were very well behaved, all sitting, listening carefully to what I had to say. And I started asking them questions like, "What do you want to do?" And this was a strange question for them to answer, because what they want to do had already been decided for them. And many of them said doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant, the professions. Okay, that was the audience. Go to the best possible university in the world to be able to do that. But of course, it's really not them that's decided it. It's their parents that have decided that for them. And I said, okay, what do you really want to do? And then some people, then was silence. Thought, what a strange question. And one young woman stood up and said, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to start my own business. Fantastic. 150 students, one stood up. So I started to talk to her about it. And sure enough, she'd had the courage to think, actually, this life that has been determined for me is not for me. So I talked to her about that, and I engaged with her, and we started to think through how she could become somebody who could manage her own business in this quite constrained environment, particularly for a young woman. And now it's a very memorable example for me, but it's an example of what I'm talking about. You're not there to determine your child's life. What you're doing is helping them to determine it, and be very careful about them determining the choice. I've seen it with my own children. They made very different choices from any that I would have predicted. But they're all sane and they seem to be doing okay. So you can't do that anymore as a parent. But if you think about it, it's the same thing about how you teach, right? I mean, as a parent, you're not trying to teach them something, you're trying to get something to emerge from your child that is their passion and their interest. That's what you should be doing, I think.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for everything.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for listening, and not only listening. I hope that you did it with your heart and mind opened, because it's what I've done. And there are going to be many things that are going to be shared. And definitely, I'm sure that as you did with many EduBists, in discussions with you, there are many EduBists who actually make choices based on the ideas and on the encouragements that you made, only after 1 or 2 hours of discussions. So I'm pretty sure that up there, someone of you, either a young one, probably a professor, would apply things, and hopefully the parents as well. Thank you very much. Stay tuned, because the next members of the advisory board will come here for the podcast. And as you mentioned, Greg, EduBiz will be here as well.
Indeed.
So you're going to have the choice. It's a 10-year and it's all year long. We are going to celebrate the happiness and the enthusiasm of EduBiz. Stay tuned. Thank you very much. Mulțumesc din suflet. Keep in touch.